Ever since Marvel Spider-Man was announced back at E3 of 2016, I've been super excited. Spider-Man is my favourite character of any medium, including real life. So I wanted to take some time to talk about the things that I like about the game, things that I'm a little bit worried about, and maybe even throw a few theories in there as well. Some parts are going to sound a bit negative, but that's just constructive criticism. That's all good. Moaning for the sake of moaning, that's the bad one. So let's jump in. After the gameplay that was shown at E3 2017, this is what I was most worried about. I knew that the parkour system would be great from what we had seen already, and also from Insomniac's previous experience with Sunset Overdrive, but the web swinging looked slow. I know that Insomniac said that they took it slow so that you could keep the helicopter in view, but web swinging is obviously the biggest part of the game. It's what's going to make it or break it, so why not show the gameplay that really showed off how good it is? And I also know that they said it's skill based. If you're good, you can go way quicker. But then why not show you going way quicker? You know that people are super excited for the web swinging. You have to impress people. Show Spider-Man's speed and agility, but they didn't. That's what got me worried. Then the Gameinformer coverage happened, and they released this footage. And I was even more worried, because it looked so close to what I wanted, but it was just off. And I imagined playing an entire game of Spider-Man being just off. It was just that the animation looked a little bit disjointed. But then they released this clip, and all of my worries faded away. Just look at how he dives and lets the tension build. When's he going to shoot out a web line? Then he does, and it's glorious. The momentum of the dive twists him around the web, his feet barely missing the cars below, the landscape is now just a blur, and on top of it, he spirals out of the pendulum and gracefully prepares for the next swing. This is art in motion. It also showed me that swinging is heavily reliant on timing, not only for fear of splatting on the pavement, but also to make sure that you're hitting the buttons at the right time. Let's use this clip as an example. The player dive bombs in between these two buildings at quite a low height and then swings out in a twisty fashion just like the previous clip. But there's something off here. The transition between dive bombing and swinging looks jagged. But in the other one, it looks smooth as butter. This shows me that it's all about timing. In this one, there's really no need for a dive bomb, so jumping back and forth between idle in-air animations and diving animations looks weak. Also looks like the player maybe stops dive bombing and then starts swinging due to fear of hitting the pavement. Whereas in this clip, he dives from a massive height, so we get a good chance to see the diving animation, and then he presses R2 to swing while still in the dive bomb, thus only transitioning from the diving animation to the swinging animation. Rather than dive, transition to idle in-air animation, which is interrupted, and then to swinging. I could be wrong about this, but that's just the way it seems. Alternatively, it could just be that the camera is jolting whilst it's trying to keep up with Spider-Man, which still isn't good, but it seems like an easy fix. Hey, I was recording and I just wanted to add something real quick. After watching each of these frames about a bazillion times now, I think timing is still a factor, and maybe the camera does have trouble catching up, but it does seem like there's also an animation problem here. It seems like Spider-Man starts to move forward a couple of frames before he actually shoots out any web line. So like I said, looks like maybe timing and camera problems is still an issue, but this animation one is definitely a big factor. Anyway, back to the video. The next thing that got me excited is this clip. This looks awesome. It's like Spider-Man's version of tripping a line from one of the skate games. The sense of speed and freedom here is insane. I love how he jumps off the web a bit at the end to gain some height, and how walls just don't stop him, he just keeps on going. And then there's the catapult over the roof ledges at the end. I love the dedication in adding mechanics that help to maintain your momentum whilst navigating the city. It really helps to make you feel like a true acrobat.
Not today. Spider-Man!
Ever since E3 last year, I've not had to worry about the combat at all. It looks like an improvised Spidey-fied version of Arkham combat rather than a straight clone like the Amazing Spider-Man games are. Although a lot of people choose not to notice that the Arkham combat system has a lot in common with Spider-Man 2's combat system. It's rare that you'll ever see Spidey counter anything in any medium. He's more of a bounce and strike kind of fighter, and it looks like that's exactly what we're getting. The Gameinformer coverage also gives us a peek at juggling enemies in the air. This looks super fun and helps to separate the combat system from most other games out there today. I'm excited to get a chance to finally see Peter's scientific genius bleed into Spider-Man by using his gadgets. The fact that this game has gadgets and is being made by Insomniac Games has me giddy with anticipation to see what they come up with. Of the gadgets that we've seen in action so far, I'm happy with how versatile some of them look, especially the web trip mine. It looks super fun to use this for tactical stealth, and then also the different varieties of ways that you can use it within combat. One aspect of the combat that I'm not quite sure about yet is the web swing kick. Don't get me wrong, it looks cool, it looks fun to use, but what is that web attached to? Why go through all the effort of making webs stick to buildings if you can just do this? There's been so many interviews where we've had Brian Intihar screaming at us saying that the web's attached to buildings, it's realistic, there's momentum, it's physics based, and then do that. I think personally I'd rather have a move where Spidey shoots out a web either side of a goon and then zips to them. We've seen something like this in the stealth gameplay, but why not use it again in regular combat, and you could just have it so that the move doesn't do quite as much damage. It's more of a way to create distance between yourself and other enemies whilst also attacking. I just want a move that doesn't break the immersion quite as much as this does. And I know that just a moment ago I said how I love the fact that Spidey is jumping in the air and juggling enemies and completely defying gravity and all laws of physics. But that's just the way I feel, alright? If it ends up staying in the game, it's not the worst thing in the world. I'll still use it, I'll still have fun with it, but I ain't gonna be happy about it.
You.
Nice jumpsuit. Slimming.
The story is probably what I'm most excited for about Marvel Spider-Man. When I think back to games like Ratchet & Clank: A Crack in Time and how that really was like a perfect end to the Ratchet & Clank series, it had some fantastic writing in there. That's Insomniac's pedigree. They do some pretty great stories. And after hearing the way in which the devs from Insomniac talk about Spider-Man and what he means to them, gives me real faith that they're going to do the character some justice. I like that they're playing the villains close to the chest as well. And considering that Pete's been Spidey for 8 years, it keeps me guessing as to which villains even exist yet. We know that Osborn's in the game, but we don't know if he's even Goblin yet. Has Otto turned bad? Has Craven ever hunted Spidey down? These are some awesome questions that I'm eager to find the answers to. And it's also nice to see that Mr. Negative's been thrust into the spotlight. I'm a big fan of the fact that Peter and MJ aren't together in this game. And that's not because I don't like the relationship in the comics, I actually love it. But because it gives a will they won't they sort of tension throughout the story. It makes it far more engaging and the relationship matters a lot more. Also, Black Cat's in the game, so that leaves doors open for other possibilities. The prospect of MJ being an investigative journalist and actually helping Pete out with his Spider-Man work sounds awesome. It helps get MJ out of this whiny girlfriend / damsel in distress territory that writers often feel the need to put her in. I just wonder how her gameplay is going to work out, and if it's going to feel like you're too underpowered, or if it's just purely stealth sections and every time you get caught that's it, because if so that might feel repetitive, but I'm still keen to learn more about it. Which brings me to Miles. I'm not opposed to the idea of Pete having some kind of apprentice, but I don't see why Miles would even be in the game if he wasn't going to be playable. Especially considering that MJ, of all people, is playable. My guess is that you'll have to play as him at some points where Pete is incapacitated. Maybe he's been turned evil by Mr. Negative at some point, or he gets captured by another villain and Miles has to come and save the day. Either way, I like that idea. It sounds cool. Miles has a different power list and moveset to Peter, so it'll add variety to gameplay anyway. One thing to mention about Miles though, is that his inclusion signals to me that Pete will die at some point. I don't think he'll die in this game, but I think they're going to spend time developing Miles so that the audience gets to a point that they will be satisfied that Miles took over. It'll also give us some time to fall in love with Peter Parker. Yeah, everybody loves Spider-Man, everybody loves Peter Parker, but we haven't seen Insomniac's Peter Parker, and it's up to them to make sure that we fall in love with him all over again. So that way by the time, if he does die, we actually care and it has impact. The last thing before we move on to the next section, I want to talk about that white spider. I'm not a hater, I actually love it. It might be one of my favourite suits yet, it might even be my favourite suit yet, but I want to know why it looks like that. Why did they make it white? We recently found out that it's some kind of flexi carbon fibre alloy to provide greater protection, but that doesn't tell us why it's white. I have a couple of theories. First is something related to Mr. Negative. We know that this is called the advanced suit, so maybe it offers protection against his powers, maybe Pete went bad at some point and made this new suit to compensate so that it doesn't happen again, but that still doesn't explain why it's white and not black. The second involves Gwen Stacy. I've followed this game pretty closely ever since it was announced, and I can't ever remember hearing anything about Gwen. Have Gwen and Pete even met yet, or is she already dead? If it's the latter, I thought that maybe Pete made the spider white as some kind of homage to Gwen, but considering that Osborn is running for mayor, I don't think this is the case. If Gwen is dead, then Pete and Norman already know about each other's alternate personas, and I can't see Pete letting Osborn be mayor for the second time, much less standing in the crowd at his press conference. There's also the diner scene where Pete says that now that Kingpin's behind bars, maybe Peter Parker can have a life. This tells me that either the Green Goblin doesn't exist, or Norman Osborn doesn't know that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. If you've ever read any comic book storyline where Pete and Norman find out about each other, Pete is constantly on edge. Norman has nothing to lose here. Pete's not going to go after Norman's family, Norman's going to go after Aunt May and MJ, and he's going to kill all of them. That's why Pete's so on the edge, and that's why I think that Norman Osborn isn't Green Goblin yet. Who knows, maybe Gwen's killed by a different villain. As long as it's personal, then it's fine, because Gwen Stacy's death is a massive thing to Peter Parker. Not only has Gwen died, but he's also lost Captain Stacy, and then on top of that, he's lost Uncle Ben. All of these people had something to do with him. At some point, he messed up and they died. This is absolutely essential to his development. Having all of this weight put on the shoulders of just a kid really helps to amplify how he's not strong enough to deal with all this. But he does it anyway. That's why he's Spider-Man. Whilst on the subject of Green Goblin, I think that this game will be the Green Goblin's origin story. I think the negative blast that we see in the PSX trailer has an effect on the people in the surrounding area, turning them bad. For most, they're just going to run around, assault people, commit daylight robbery. This obviously isn't good for New York City, but it's easy for Spider-Man to deal with. But Norman, he's a man with influence, power, and money. I think the blast makes him go insane and create the suit, the glider, the pumpkin bombs, all of it. This is just a theory, but I thought it was an interesting one nonetheless. Now that we've actually heard about and seen some of the aspects of the open world gameplay, I'm really excited. I love that petty crimes are back, and I'm glad to hear that they evolve both immediately and over the course of the game. They did evolve in Spider-Man 2, but it started to become repetitive after a while. I got a little bit tired of breaking up a gang fight and then jumping on top of a car and then actually beating up the car rather than the bad guys inside. Interacting with civilians looks like it's going to be fun, shooting finger guns, taking selfies, that all sounds great. I think it's going to get old pretty quick. However, jumping between saving the city and then interacting with the city sounds like it's really going to help to make the city feel alive. I also like that you can run around and find collectibles to progress Black Cat's missions. That sounds fun. I just hope that the collectibles provide more than just mission progression. Otherwise it's going to get annoying having to search for them just to progress. Maybe Felicia could leave clues when you find one so that you can find the other. Add some kind of investigation aspect to it. Or maybe you could have it that your spider sense goes off when you're near one. Anything to make it feel like better gameplay, make it more engaging, rather than just chucking 300 glowing glass cats into New York. The detail in the world also looks great, even the rooftops look well designed. Rather than just flat tops, there's people on them partying and hanging out. Really helps to give the city a pulse. I did hear that there might not be a day-night cycle in the game, but the time of day will change depending on the missions that you do. I think this is fine. Insomniac obviously has an artistic vision for some scenes, but I will say that once the game has been completed, it would be nice to have a day-night cycle since it's not going to be interfering with any of the story scenes. Let's get the obvious one out of the way. The City That Never Sleeps DLC has some people worried. Personally, if it's an idea that they have but they know they're not going to be able to finish it in the time frame before the release of the game, that's fine. But if it's done and ready to go, that's bad. I honestly think it's the former though. If you look at the listing for the Collector's Edition, it says that users will receive DLC by March 2019. So I don't think there's any need to worry. They're obviously still working on it. This is just a quick one because most of the animation looks top notch. Some of the best I've ever seen in the game actually. But in the combat it can start to look a little bit disjointed. It just needs to be blended a little bit better so it gives a real flow. Like I said, this one was quick. This is what has me most worried about Marvel's Spider-Man. At the time it was revealed at E3 2016, Brian Intihar said that they'd been working on the game for a little over a year and a half when it was announced. It seems like they had a lot ready to go considering that it was a gameplay trailer rather than a CGI one, but we heard nothing until E3 2017, a whole year with no news. It's obvious that the game was announced way too early, and if we round up that year and a half to maybe a year and 10 months at best, by its release it will be 4 years. Some may think that's a great amount of time to work on a game this large. Me personally, I don't. I think 4 years is not enough at all. This may be the biggest team that Insomniac has ever had, and they've definitely got a budget to deal with it this time around. But they're developing two massive systems from the ground up, web swinging and the combat system. This is an insane undertaking, to have two massive systems that the game heavily relies on to be absolutely perfected within 4 years, something that Insomniac hasn't really done before. Yeah, Sunset Overdrive had some amazing traversal, but it wasn't web swinging, this is its own beast entirely. I just feel like maybe they need some more time. Maybe they feel pressured to push it out because by the time that this game is released, it will have featured at 3 E3s. When your game has featured at as many E3s as there are E's in E3, the game was definitely announced far too early. Having said this though, obviously if when it comes to September 7th and the game is amazing, you will hear no complaints from me. That's all I want. I want a great Spider-Man game. I've been a massive fan of Insomniac ever since I was a kid, and I have complete faith that they know what they're doing. I just think they might be cutting it a little bit close to the wire on this one. Either way, you can colour me excited.
Whew. Anyone else need a breather?
That about does it for this video, guys. Thank you for watching. I'm mega excited for Spider-Man, so it was a lot of fun to talk about this for a little bit. If you liked the video, leave a like. If you didn't like it, that's cool too. Leave a dislike. Leave a comment and let me know how I can improve. Alternatively, you could leave a comment telling me your theories for Spider-Man. Did you agree with any of mine? And if you think you'd like this kind of content in the future, subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. On Tuesday, I'm going to try and get out a review for God of War, because obviously I'm playing it on release like everybody else, so look forward to that. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.